Rentarou, our current harem king. The man who has done and will do pretty much everything for the sake of his girlfriends. He can probably even take out Goku if it meant the safety and happiness of his girlfriends. So where does this immense power come from? What if I told you it came from a place of fear? A fear of living a life of isolation and without love. Before we get too deep into this, I don't fully believe this 100%. I do think the possibility is there, but nothing is guaranteed. Everything from here on out is based purely on speculation, technicalities, and just being a fun thought experiment. So if I turn out to be wrong, I'm just wrong. Now with that disclaimer out of the way, I'm Moonlight150, and now, on to the theory. Let's go back to where it all began with where I first started with this idea. One night before bed, I was rereading my personal favorite collection of chapters of the series has had so far, that being the Marriage Proposal trilogy. When I arrived at the final chapter of the trilogy where he proposes, and everyone happily tells him yes. His eyes tear up from happiness, and they go all berserker mode drunk on marriage. Peak fiction all around. But it was this scene right here that turned on my suspicion brain. Something felt different about this, and I couldn't place my finger on it. Something was telling me that there was more to this scene than meets the eye. But coming to no real conclusion, I decided to let it go and moved on with my life. Fast forward a bit of time later, and I'm in a conversation with some other 100 Girlfriends fans on Discord, and the topic of Rentarou's parents came up, which is weirdly a topic that comes up a lot in the community. Namely, we were recounting all the mentions of his parents. Some thought there was more than one, but in reality, there was only really one scene. For those who don't remember, in chapter 120, the first installment of Rentarou's family daily life, in the final segment, Rentarou buys a gift for Uto, and Yamame asks if Rentarou's family is rich like the Hanazonos, to which he replies with the only mention of his parents in the total of 186 chapters as of the writing of this video, that both of his parents are teachers, and that they have a very normal family. Many people, including myself, probably subconsciously read this that he has a life with your typical nuclear family of a mom and dad and child all living together. But after rereading this with a different point of view, it's possible this normal that he mentions is more directly relating to just living a normal middle-class life. Not poor, not rich. Just an average middle-class style of living and upbringing with a teacher parent's income. Yes, I know this is a technicality on just interpreting on how you read something. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that it was entirely speculation based, so this is how it's gonna go. But that line of thought is what sent me down the road to the idea that possibly he comes from a home without love. It's to replace the love that he did not grow up with. I know a lot of fans have assumed that his parents are probably just like him. Many parents in this series are exact duplicates of their children, or I guess it would be vice versa. But there are plenty of characters from this series where their parents are nothing like their children. Take Meimei and Rin for example. Meimei's parents aren't super shy. In fact, they seem like some of the most normal parents we have seen from this series. And Rin's parents don't have any affinity for violence, at least that we have seen. In fact, they abhor it. So it's not far-fetched that Rentarou and his entire being of living for love is his own thing, and doesn't come from his parents. Honestly, the more I go down this hole, his obsession for love probably stems from not having any good love role models growing up. Continuing down that thought, if his parents were this great example of a perfect couple madly in love, wouldn't Rentarou bring them up at some point, saying something like, "I hope to be as good a husband as my father," or "I want to make a loving, tight-knit family just like the one I was raised in," or something along those lines. What is not being said can be just as telling as what is being said. Granted, what has been said is very little, minuscule even. Now you can easily counter this notion of thought by saying he also hasn't mentioned growing up in a loveless home, or that his parents aren't all lovey-dovey, and you'd be right. Refer back to a minute ago when I said this whole entire video was run on purely speculation. I know I clickbaited you all with the divorce word in the thumbnail, and I apologize. I figured it was the catchier buzzword. What I think might be going on is that Rentarou currently resides in a home of parents in a loveless marriage. This would explain Rentarou saying he lives a normal life, because if he did split his time between two houses, one for his mom and one for his dad, he might not consider that normal. And from the very few shots we have seen Rentarou in his home, which is very few mind you, probably among the least we have ever seen from a protagonist in a slice of life series, But from the little we do see, it's always the same house. But two parents living in the same house and dealing with one another for the sake of providing for their child would work with everything we have seen so far. I also want to make one thing clear. I know I'm painting this as bleak right now, but I don't think he is a victim of abuse. I don't think his parents are mean or anything of that sort, either to one another or to Rentarou himself. Honestly, it's probably the opposite. They care about their son, so much so they are willing to stay living in the same household and keeping everyone in the family afloat financially with each other's paychecks to provide for him. There's just no familial love though. I'm just running on the idea that his family isn't the epitome of love I think we all assumed it would be. In fact, coming from a home of examples of two people who aren't in love, or maybe even fell out of love, would explain a lot of Rentarou's actions and his hyperfixation on love. He wants to amend and do what his family couldn't. Speaking of family, that is another point I eventually came across. The fact is that the group is called Rentarou's Family. Why name it that? Yes, it was originally a cute name for their small group for a competition that they came up with on the fly, but they later adapted it to be the actual group name, and it's so well known now that other people in the school began referring to the group as Rentarou's Family. Also, a quick side note, Rentarou's Family was a translation choice made by the Zune Scans team, whereas the official anime sub, the dub, and even the official 7 Seas English translation uses the Rentarou Family. While not a big difference, one sounding more possessive and the other more descriptive, but no matter which version of the family name you use, either way the intention is the same. Naming your polycule of a relationship family feels almost like he's making up for something. Maybe something he's been missing his whole life, a sense of familial love. After these thoughts, I came back to my original idea, back in the marriage proposal chapter and this shot of Rentarou. I looked deep into his eyes thinking, what is making this so different? Then it hit me. The way he is crying. Or not actually crying. Just tears welling up in his eyes. This way of crying is different than we have seen throughout the series so far. So, I went back and looked at every instance of Rentarou crying, and I was right. Look at all these other times. In those instances where he is crying, it's played up for comedic effect. Rivers of tears rolling down his face or spouting from his eyes like sprinklers. All over-the-top cartoony stuff playing into the fact that this is a gag manga. But this marriage proposal crying shot is different. Tears aren't spraying out, they aren't forming rivers down his face, they just well up in his eyes. And even when he's wiping them up with his sleeve, it's not pouring or spouting either. Even his happy tears are different, such as these from the 2 idol chapters. They aren't the comedic spouts or rivers, but they aren't what we have in the marriage trilogy either. These happy tears of Rentarou still have a bit of cartooniness to them by being big teardrops running down his face. It's actually quite amazing Nozawa has put this kind of detail into the different kinds of ways that Rentarou cries, depending on if it's comedic or serious, and even depending on the kind of seriousness. So going back to the marriage trilogy crying, this is why this crying seems different, because it is. It's not a happy or sad cry, it's relief. The kind of crying or tearing up that you do when you feel relief when something big that has been burdening you is suddenly lifted off your shoulders. The relief that he got a yes from these girls. That's what I was looking for, and that's why this scene felt so different to me than any other. Now with all of this said, let me tell you a slightly different version of the story of Rentarou Aijo with this new information. You are Rentarou Aijo. Born May 1st, 2003. You don't know much about yourself or where you are or the world around you. All that you know is that you must love. Hell, it's baked into your DNA. And maybe it was before you were born. Maybe it was when you were little. But at some point, your parents had a falling out. They fell out of love. Something happened. Maybe your mom lost a sister when your cousin Chio lost her mom. Your mom is now stricken with grief and is inconsolable. Your father tried to be supportive, but to no avail. It just led to more arguing. But in this tragedy, they decided that a child needs their 2 parents no matter what, unlike what little Chio will have to do now. So even though they were no longer getting along, they love you enough to stay together in the same household on their combined teacher salaries so they can provide for you during your childhood. At only 8 months old, you confess to your first love interest, but she turns you down. After that, you spend the next 15 years of your life working on yourself and confessing to 99 more girls, but you are turned down each and every time. You wake up every morning trying to motivate yourself to get out of bed and get through the day. You reach your middle school graduation still without a girlfriend, the one thing you want most. Your friend kicks you while you're down, calling you the love monster, making you want to sever ties with them before heading into high school. In a desperate attempt for some answers and good luck going into high school, you go to a shrine and pray to a god, where you come face to face with the god of love himself. Not sure if you believe what he says or not, but you're hopeful and attend your first day of high school, where you literally bump into two amazing girls. After some slice of life rom-com shenanigans, you find yourself confessed to for the first time in your life. You're overjoyed, but now stuck between a rock and a hard place picking between one, especially once you get informed that not picking a soulmate will lead to their death. In the end, you take a swing for the fences and ask them both to date you, fearing this will blow up in your face and they will both walk away. They surprisingly say yes. The next day, you're so excited about finally having a girlfriend, you want to tell someone and gush about them, but you cut off your only friend earlier that week for insulting you, and you know at home your parents live a life probably not believing in a thing called love due to how their lives turned out. Or you don't want to rub the love you now have in their face to a couple of people who fell out of love. Either way, you decide to spare them and keep it a secret for now. With no one else to turn to and needing to say out loud how excited you are to finally have a girlfriend, you end up talking to a telephone pole. After more rom-com hijinks, you find yourself zinging with another girl, to where you learn a new truth about yourself. Just because you met another girl and fell for her, doesn't mean you fell out of love with either of the other two like you feared might happen, like what happened with your parents. Instead, you discovered that you could love them all equally. But every time you encountered and fell in love with another girl, and you asked the group for their consent to add another, you nervously think, is this finally it? Is this the straw that finally breaks the camel's back? I know I've been asking a lot of these girls to accept me dating all of them at once, but have we finally reached the limit of their patience? Will they say no and break up the family? Is this how I end up alone? But thankfully, they keep saying yes. But that won't stop you from having these nervous thoughts every time. A lifetime of rejections and living with your parents in a loveless relationship has left everlasting scars on you. You put in every ounce of effort of your entire being in to make each and every girlfriend you have as happy and as satisfied as you possibly can make them. Their love fuels you to keep going, so it is barely an inconvenience. You couldn't possibly imagine a life without them now, as you even told the god of love the next time you saw him. Skip to some time later, you now have 25 girlfriends, and an opportunity has presented itself. You proclaim you are doing everything in your power to make this Rentarou's family thing work, no matter what it takes, and this is the next step in making all of that work. You make sure everyone is on the same page with the idea of marriage. Then you can finally hear those words you were waiting for, that they are all perfectly okay with living together under the same roof, the collective marriage you have been working towards. But the other line of thought now enters their minds. He couldn't possibly marry all of us, can he? Now is your time to strike. You're nervous as sweat is running down your face, just as you are when you ask for permission to add another girlfriend to the group. But the stakes may just be even higher now. You ask them, and after a brief pause, they say yes. 16 years of living with parents who might just not believe in a thing called love, who may even denounce love even existing. After those 100 rejections throughout your first 16 years of life, maybe you were finally starting to think that too, that you were chasing some kind of fairy tale. But then it happened. Not only did you find a girlfriend, but you found 25, whom you all love and they love you back just as much. And here they are, making a promise to stay together and one day get married, the ultimate promise, becoming engaged. And all that mental weight and anguish vanished in that instant, and you couldn't help but tear up. Your hard work and determination has finally paid off in ways that you didn't think would happen, but now it has. Now on to present chapters. You have added a few more girlfriends to the group, all following in those same footsteps. You do still fear asking for permission to add more girlfriends, but you still remind yourself that these girlfriends of yours have already said yes to your proposal, and it brings you some comfort. These girls have changed your life for the better in more ways than you can count, and you're eternally grateful and happy to do whatever it takes to make them happy and satisfied just as they have made you. This is how I now view Rentarou Aijo, a man scarred by a past of rejections and possible upbringing at home of a negative attitude towards love has left this man scarred and scared of love, until he has now so much of it he can barely contain himself. Like I said at the top of this video, this is all speculation, and could easily be disproven by a single panel showing his parents happily together looking after their son. But as it stands at currently 186 chapters and 30 girlfriends in, with the lack of any kind of mention of his parents or his family life, one can't help but wonder. What do you think? Do you think my line of thinking has any merit? Do you think sometime in the future we get a dive into Rentarou as a character? Because honestly, we know next to nothing about him outside of what I've shown in this video. And that's only a couple panels of roughly 3,809 pages of panels across 186 entries in this series. The series has focused so much on the girls and their backstories that Rentarou's had close to none. The most we have gotten was that baby backstory in the first volume extras. We need to give our leading man some fleshing out as a character other than he will do anything for his girlfriends. But anyway, even if I'm totally on the money or completely wrong, this was a fun thought experiment, and hopefully you had a good time too. I've been Moonlight150, and if you're new here, I do weekly reviews of each new chapter of the 100 Girlfriends manga, as well as the occasional side content like theories like this one every once in a while. So if you haven't subscribed, after you leave that like, be sure to follow too to see those. I also cover another manga series called I Can't Choose a Childhood Friend that is very 100 Girlfriends-like in tone. So if you've never heard of that new manga series, you can check it out with my review that I'll leave a link for on the screen. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all on the next video.